And are we live? I
Hopefully.
think we're live. Okay, so hopefully we're now live and you all could see us. Welcome to Android Design in Action, Travel, Booking, and Planning. Sorry for the screw up. We're about 5 minutes late. As you can see, we're not in our normal room today. There's a scheduling kerfuffle, if you will. Anyway, so let's get started. My name is Roman Nurek.
Adam Kosh. Over in London we have...
Hi, Nick Butcher.
Yeah, so we've got the three of us here, and today we're going to be talking about a couple of apps, that fall into the kind of travel, booking, and planning category. So let's get started. If you could select the slides there. The first app we're going to do is Kayak. And actually, before we jump into this, we kind of forgot to talk about what the show is all about. Since this is only the fourth or whatever episode of the show, we should probably mention in this show we don't really review apps and let you know what the best apps are to go download. We basically look at a few apps that have been nominated or submitted to us for review by the greater developer community, and we take a look at how we can spruce them up visually, how we can make some improvements here and there to the visual design. And the apps that are submitted are actually reviewed the previous Friday in the App Clinic, where Rado Meyer and Ian Nee Lewis take a look at kind of a higher level overview of the app and how the overall app can be improved. But in this show, we look at the design strictly and specific screens even. So let's get started with Kayak.
Well, and just to say, and today we're having a special focus on tablets, right?
Well, that's right. That's right. So today we're going to be talking about apps in the context of tablet usage. So you will not see any phone screens, as far as I know. Maybe later down the road where we talk about design news, but yeah, we'll be focusing on 7-inch and 10-inch tablets. So for Kayak, we looked at the 7-inch tablet version. So in this case, we have a Nexus 7, and Kayak is basically an app that lets you do lots and lots of different things. Lets you look for flights, look for hotels, look for car rentals. It's got a million features, and these are all awesome features. The feature set is completely broad and expansive. There's so much you can do with the app. But we chose to focus for now on the hotel search, since that's kind of one of the key features. So in this screen here, I don't know, you can't really see my mouse pointer. That's fine. Oh, you can. Sweet. In this screen here, you basically, this is actually two screens. You have a dashboard, which is kind of the landing page. When you first open up Kayak on your Nexus 7, you have this kind of set of icons that indicate the different sections of the app. And then you have kind of extraneous or separate functionality, things like airline directory, airline fees, kind of random assortment of other things in the action overflow. Once you select hotel search, which is kind of this top middle icon, you get to a hotel search screen. And in this screen, you basically select the date, or the check-in dates, the number of guests, number of rooms, all that type of stuff. When you press search hotels, you're then taken to a list or a map of hotels. So basically, you can see here that to search for a hotel, you have to go through 3 separate screens. You have to first see the dashboard, then type in some information about the hotel you're looking for, and then see the results. And then possibly, obviously, go into the hotel details. So do you guys have any thoughts on Kayak in general, or these couple of screens?
I had a couple of thoughts. So first of all, I love Kayak. I think it's I've used the website for many years, so it's great that they have a solid app. One interesting thing about these designs, I guess, is that they have the parts of our sort of design best practices, but other parts are kind of just missing the design best practices. So you've kind of got these gradients, you've got sort of a semi-action bar up the top.
The faux action bar.
The faux action bar, as we call it, and you've got the drop-down spinners have the little triangle to indicate the spinner, but it's kind of half and half. And I don't even know if they would need that compatibility menu button down the bottom anymore, because they kind of have the faux action bar. So simply switching the Target SDK up might actually remove that kind of thing. Yeah. Nick?
So my first thoughts when I look at it is this says to me it's a web app masquerading as a native app to me. There's some subtle hints you can see there, artifacts like the gradients and how some of the screens are clearly just being stretched up to fill the canvas, which immediately set me in a frame of mind thinking that this app is going to be perhaps slightly less responsive than I might hope, and it might not follow the kind of my expected mental models. Certain things, like if you look at like the up arrow next to the app icon on the second screen, you can see it's slightly too big, slightly too thick, and all of these things, which it may seem very subtle, but they just hint to the user that this app is going to function unlike the standard apps which you're used to functioning with. So already, like, I'm also a big fan of Kayak, but already there's a few uh-ohs going on.
Yeah, and actually, just to talk a little bit more about the faux action bar, there's really no reason to do it anymore, right? I think actually Jake Wharton, who's the author of one of the greatest kind of action bar libraries out there, Action Bar Sherlock, mentioned, you're doing a lot of work. If you're rewriting it yourself, you're doing a lot of work to try to get it to look and behave like the rest of the platform. So there's really just no need to do it, since for backwards compatibility purposes, there are libraries like Action Bar Sherlock that just do the work for you. It's really just a drop-in, right? So there's really no reason these days to do it. It's so stylable, it's so customizable. Pretty much everything about the action bar is customizable. So there's really no reason to have to make your own. One last thing I want to talk about before we jump into the redesign is the branding. So the branding throughout this, I do love the color palette. There's a strong kind of orange, dark gray, light gray color palette, and I'm personally a huge fan of single accent color palettes where you have grayscale plus an accent. It's really phenomenal, and I think that they have lots of opportunities to use that really unique Kayak orange throughout. And I think that what they have here is one possible way of doing things, but I feel like they can go even a step further. So let's jump into the redesign. This is one possible way that you can imagine a tablet version of Kayak to look. So in the top you have your standard action bar with there's no real need for an up affordance in this case because this is a single screen. You'll notice that we combine 3 screens into one effectively. At the left you have the same kind of hotel search, and we've kind of redesigned some of the elements to fit better into the Holo design, the Holo styling. We've also given more prominence to recent searches. This is something that Ian pointed out last week on the App Clinic. Recent searches is something that's really commonly used, right? I mean, you really want to have access. You don't want to lose something you just did, right? So if you went into the app and did a search, maybe did another search, you would go back to the other one, you really don't want to have to rewrite everything or re-enter all that information.
Especially if you have a property like Kayak, which has that rich web property. So if you're able to sync that search history from the desktop to your devices as well, that can be a killer feature. That can save you a bunch of time, like Google Maps does, for example. Yeah,
totally. I mean, sync that's like in Russian we would say samo собой. That's like a whole separate story. But sync, absolutely, that would make this whole experience just like seamless. So have recent searches. We simplified the entry form. We used icons. Actually, the phone version of the app uses icons, and the tablet version doesn't. It seems kind of silly to have to redesign the same screen across or massively redo the same screen across different form factors. I feel like in this case they could have just combined certain elements from both and had less work to do when porting to different sizes. But anyway, so that's kind of this screen. You'll notice that we did some touch-ups on the map balloons or map bubbles and things like that. But one question is, what about core navigation, right? Switching between hotels, flights, cars, things like that. So for that, we decided to use the action bar spinner navigation. So basically, at the top level, you start off with hotels or whatever you feel is the most common or most important aspect of Kayak. So you can start with hotels or flights. We also added notifications since that was in the phone version of the app. And you can also, one minor point is you can make it sticky, right? So if somebody most recently used flight search in Kayak, then when they back out and go about their daily lives and they open up Kayak again, you can start them off in flight search, right? It's totally up to you where you start the user. If you have a strong indication that they're into flights right now, then start them off there. And then lastly, you have this kind of area on the right to put extra functionality. So in the Action Overflow, you can put things like price alerts or packing lists, stuff that's not really commonly used, probably maybe like 5 or 10% of the time. So what do you guys think so far?
Yeah, I think I really like it. Well, one question first of all. The diagonal up-pointing arrows by the search history, I gather that pre-populates the result. Yeah, I think that's a great feature. Like I use that all the time, say for Google search. Especially, when you're doing searches for hotels, you might want to just change the dates a little bit. You might want to tweak the location or something like that. So I think that's great. The other thing I really like is Kayak's sort of been traditionally known for their sort of power of applying filters. But on a desktop experience, you've got a lot of screen real estate to fit those filters in immediately. On a smaller device, on a mobile device, or even on a smaller tablet like the Nexus 7, there's not as much screen real estate, so it's sort of been collapsed into that action button up the top there. I don't think you actually mocked up how the filters would look.
No.
The nice thing is that the screen remains sort of clear and easy to read, and then engaging that can sort of unfold the power of the Kayak filters.
Yeah, so filters actually in landscape, in their current app, when you tilt it into landscape, it shows the filters as a left pane. It seems like, that may make sense. In general, we try to maintain something called functional parity across portrait and landscape. So if you switch from portrait into landscape, your view of the world, your view of the app won't drastically change, and the things you can do with the app won't drastically change. Showing filters may be appropriate, but at the same time, like filters is almost always kind of a separate action, right? Like filter what you're currently looking at, or sort. So if you have both sort and filter, for example, if you had a list here, if you had both sort and filter, then you should probably have those side by side since they're very commonly used together. Let me just quickly, since we're kind of running low on time, let me just quickly jump into this next screen. So once you get into the search results, what I thought here is on a 7-inch device, you can't really show both the map in its full fidelity and a left pane in portrait side by side. So one option is you can actually collapse the left pane into this kind of into this collapsed left pane, I guess, if there's a better name for it. This is similar to what Google Talk does on a 7-inch or a 10-inch device. And then if you're on a 10-inch device and you have this space, then you never have to collapse. Or if you're in landscape on 7-inch, you also just don't have to collapse. Lastly, I know we're running a little low on time. But lastly, I just wanted to talk about this point that Ian made. Actually, I think either Ian or Rado made this, but last week they talked about this concept of let me book my entire trip, right? If you're Kayak and you have access to hotels and flights and car rentals and stuff to see around you, and we'll talk about that in a second with TripAdvisor, do more than just give the user the option to choose hotels and flights as separate parts of the app. Don't necessarily separate your app into separate sections. So what if you combine this entire trip planning, booking, itinerary experience into one flow? So this is something that we mocked up here, where basically your sections are no longer hotels, flights, and cars and whatever. Your sections are now just your trips. This is kind of similar to what TripIt does, and TripIt has this great model of giving you an itinerary, right? It shows you all of your hotels, cars, and everything all in one chronological flow, and people are really good at dealing with time or chronological flows. So in this case, we have the hotel search, which is part of this left pane, which is basically an itinerary. So as you scroll up, you get earlier in your itinerary, and as you scroll down, you get further down in your itinerary. So your arriving flight is above the hotel search, which is above the departing flight. Once you find and book a hotel, that hotel search card, in this case, it kind of turns into a hotel booking card. And then you can, if you're not interested in getting a car rental, for example, or a hotel, you can just swipe it away to dismiss it. So what do you guys think? Does this make sense as kind of like an itinerary planning?
I want this app. I love what you've done here. I mean, I completely agree with what you say about the grouping making sense to me. Kind of rather than having to go in and out of different apps or different sections of an app, it kind of putting it on a timeline instantly. I just get it, and I really like it. And it must simplify your workflow as well. I mean, if I've entered the dates of my flights, I mean, surely you can infer the dates of the hotel stay as well, and kind of grouping it all together makes that completely obvious. So I think that's one of my major takeaways from this redesign is the way you've simplified the workflow to remove steps, remove dialogues, and kind of have it easier to access.
Yeah, totally. And you open this up to other possibilities, right? So like if in the future you expand to restaurant search or something like that, you can add kind of placeholders for restaurants. Let's say every night of your stay, or right before your flight, or something like that. You have really a lot of options of fully managing a flight or fully managing a trip. Actually, one thing I wanted to call out is Adam and I were talking about this, and we struggled with how do you add stuff, right? So we have this extra action in the top right that's kind of like add a card. But Adam, you mentioned you could just place that in line, right? You don't have to necessarily have that.
Yeah, I mean you've already got the add car rental there, so I mean there could be just an extra button or something that triggers adding a sort of segment to the trip. Either way, I mean that would just be something that would be discussed before actually implementing this. But overall, I like it. It's cool.
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about this type of thing, right? There's so many different options, and one thing we should caveat, and we should probably get onto TripAdvisor very soon, but one thing we should caveat is these are just visual design mocks, right? You won't really know until you actually have a prototype in your hands whether or not all this really works. But these are just some ideas that we throw around. So take all of our mocks with a grain of salt. All right. So with that, should we move on to TripAdvisor, Nick?
Let's.
So first, Nick, you want to talk about what we see here?
My messy desk. So I've really enjoyed doing this Android Design in Action show where we're trying to quite quickly turn around some redesigns from throwing around a few ideas on how we might change things based on playing with the app for a little while, to turning that into a mock to give you a good kind of understanding of what that might look like. So for me, one of the biggest takeaways has been more sketching, the better. The more time I spend in low fidelity prototyping tools, like you can see here on my desk, I find it saves me tons of time down the road, actually in Photoshop or whatever your tool of choice is for producing high fidelity mocks. So here's a couple of examples. You can see ideas I've played around with, and there's scribblings out and refinements here, there, and everywhere, and it just saves you tons and tons of time. So I'd say paper, pencil, sticky notes are your friends here. And for me, I've found as well bouncing ideas off of someone else. The minute you try and articulate an idea to someone else, you find yourself sketching it out, trying to show it to someone. It gets so much better than rather than sitting down and kind of plowing away on your own. So it's been fun.
And just to call out, a few episodes ago, I think it was maybe in the second episode of the show, or maybe the third, we actually provided links to some of the great templates that you can download and print out. So you don't have to necessarily start from scratch, right? You can start from one-to-one size templates that you can just print out and start drawing on. So that's definitely a good start. But Nick here decided to just go straight from pen to paper, starting from scratch, right?
Yeah, I found the templates are great when you're trying to get consistency between screens, because you can get rough sizes of elements aligning up to get you that consistency. But if you're just doing a single screen, I often find going even lower fidelity, just a blank piece of paper, can be lighter weight.
Cool. All right, so let's move on to the app itself. So this is TripAdvisor, and this is the dashboard screen. Nick, thoughts, comments?
Yeah, so this is the first thing you're presented with when you open the TripAdvisor application on a tablet, and it's kind of sparse. I mean, we do advocate a kind of a minimal look and feel, but I feel like this is taking it a little bit too far, especially when you consider tablets might have a slightly different use case. I find, well, most studies have shown that tablets are used in a much more kind of discovery kind of mode when you perhaps have a longer engagement time and you're looking for something a little bit more engaging, as opposed to perhaps a mobile phone experience when you're looking for a snacking experience to get in and out quite quickly. So for me, this design fell a bit flat for a few things. So there's the sparsity at first. Next up is laying out all the kind of different verticals which TripIt offers. It's kind of like exposing the way that they internally classify the information. I mean, I know whenever I go to the TripIt service, and TripAdvisor service, and I absolutely love TripAdvisor. I use it all the time. I use it to plan my honeymoon. It's fantastic. But I never have gone and drilled down, oh, I want hotels, now I want hotels in East Asia or whatever. I always just search. Like for me, search is the key way you can navigate. So I felt like having the top line verticals called out was kind of almost like misleading. And lastly, as with most of these redesigns, it doesn't quite fall into that like natural Android look and feel. Already the height of the bar at the top is kind of non-standard. There's some gradients throughout the application, and padding's kind of off. The text boxes aren't quite as you might expect. And also throughout the application, I found lots of extra stuff which you kind of get with a website. So, for example, there might be links to legal information and privacy policies and so on that you will quite often see in perhaps the footer of a website. But part of the beauty of an app experience you can achieve by simplifying and really concentrating on doing one or two things really, really well. So I found there's a lot of web metaphors which have been carried over into the application, perhaps through reusing code in web views, for example, that really detracted from my experience and didn't really offer any kind of added benefit. So we tried to kind of reduce those distractions. Any other thoughts, guys?
Well, I'm at a loss of words. That was very well articulated. Yeah, I think that. I mean, this is almost like similar to the Google search, web, like Google.com, right? When you go on the website of Google.com, you're just presented with a search box. But Google.com, when you want to Google something, you generally actually want to do a search, right? That's kind of the one thing people think when they think, the average person, when they think Google, they think of search, right? But for TripAdvisor, to me at least, and I'm guessing most people, they don't immediately only think of search. They probably think of search as well as discovery, like you said, right? Like what are the great things that people are saying on TripAdvisor? It's a network, it's a community, right, of content, right? That's rich and that you may not really know about. You may not know what you're looking for when you get to TripAdvisor. So bubbling that up, I think, is very important. Okay. All right. So do you want to talk about the redesign, Nick? In 3, 2, 1.
Wow, there's some lovely effects going on here. Wow, look at that. Okay, so here is what I've done with the redesign this week. So there's a couple of things we've really tried to achieve. The first off is adopting the hollow look and feel, as we always tend to do. So you can see this in the flatter gradients, the kind of the use of the color palette, while still retaining the TripAdvisor accent, is kind of a much more standard color palette, taking quite a lot of inspiration from the Google Plus app, in fact, and using standard like familiar iconography, which the users should kind of instantly be able to kind of pick up on. But what we've done here is we've, while emphasizing search, so you see we've made the search box stand out from the rhythm of the rest of the application to give it prominence, as well as like really enlarging it. I mean, that's a huge kind of search box, really, as well as floating up other relevant content. If you go to TripAdvisor's website, it's full of lots of kind of discovery mechanisms. So be that social, from what your friends are up to kind of curated lists of things you might enjoy or like to discover. So we've tried to bubble up that information. So while doing that, we've also retained the information which is most important to the user. So starting from the far left, we have the user's information. So they have this kind of My Saves area where you can save information for later retrieval, as well as, similar to the Kayak, we've given recent searches some more prominence here as well.
Awesome, yeah. And then nearby, right? Like if you're near something that's really important, right, you want to bubble it up, right? So if you're on a tablet, let's say in your hotel in London, in this case, and the Big Ben is having some sort of like event or something, or there's some sort of event at the Big Ben. Clearly, I know nothing about London events.
Every hour, right? It happens every hour.
That's true. So you can kind of bubble something up like that in a really visual way, right? I also love, actually, this is very interesting, what you've done with the friends. So this activity stream where, a friend did something with a place, right, like reviewed a place. I like kind of the interesting space, or the interesting usage of that square space where you basically made two triangles overlapping. This actually works quite well with OpenGL meshes, as far as I know. But anyway, it's kind of interesting to kind of show half avatar, half thumbnail of the place. Really interesting treatment there.
Yeah, if you look back a couple of slides at my messy sketches, you'll see a couple of post-it notes of ways of doing that. So I had tried trying to pair these two images together, and you can have some overlap, or maybe have it slightly indented, but it ends up looking kind of uneven and jagged. So there was a suggestion from a friend actually going for the kind of the diagonal wipe, or whatever you want to call it, and I quite like it.
Cool.
Just a couple of notes here. Like as Roman said, we're not going to be showing any phone redesigns here. You might end up either reprioritizing or kind of showing slightly different content on the phone, because that might be a different context the user's in. Like I can imagine saying that my stuff, the recents to my saves, is going to be really prominent, but some of the big visuals might kind of be a bit too heavy for a phone. You might want to de-emphasize those slightly, or perhaps even not show them. I think the approach I've really taken here is thinking about this from a tablet point of view. So you're thinking about these big visual engaging experiences, so lots of visuals.
One other minor thing, we're running super low on time, but I just really want to call this out. In general, when designing with photos, some folks may think, oh, my photo is like certain aspect ratio, so the UI element also needs to be that aspect ratio. Don't lock yourself in that way, especially for photos where the subject is in the center. Feel free to use something called center crop, which is a scale type on image views. Where basically, you select the aspect ratio and the image is cropped within the UI element. So you'll chop off either the sides, the left and the right, or the top and the bottom to make sure that the image itself maintains its aspect ratio while fitting within the UI element. So I think this works really well for things like avatars, like people avatars where their face is usually in the center, and photos of Big Ben, for example.
Cool. I know we're short on time. I just want to say I like it.
Yeah, I would
use this. Yeah,
totally. Okay, so let's move on to the detail.
Yeah, we did one more screen. So seeing as Ian was having so much trouble in searching for Venice in the app clinic, if you caught it last Friday, we decided to take a little look at Venice here. So this is what happens when you search for Venice. You just get a generic kind of like city level result. I think the original is a lot better than the landing screen. I think they're doing some good things here. They're showing some appropriate information. But I also think they have a problem with the information density. I think they're kind of showing too much information as well. Now, I know for me, when I think TripAdvisor, I keep saying that. When I think TripAdvisor, I think the beauty of the service is in the sheer number of reviews, right? It can give you this very intelligently weighted list. I don't want to get 1,000 results, which other search engines might offer. I kind of am mostly interested in setting a couple of filters and then just seeing the top 5 or 10 and trusting those reviews. I'll browse the reviews, make sure they're okay. So I've really tried to draw that out in the redesign here. So we tried to decrease the isn't helping and just float up the things which TripAdvisor does really well. So you can see in the design at the bottom here, we've retained the same kind of look and feel, so a kind of flatter look, but we've really bubbled up the user ratings, and you can see the ranking is given quite a lot of prominence with each listing on the side. And straight away we've exposed for when you select a result, you'll see the graph and the photos and more information about that place.
Awesome. I also noticed that you've given just more white space around all the results on the left. Again, I think this is something I bring up fairly often, but use of white space is just really important, especially on tablets. And I think that the bottom screen that you've designed here just makes better use of white space throughout all the 3 panes that are visible.
Cool. I didn't get time to mock it up this week, but I was toying with the idea of having like a third pane off to the right, as it were. So when you were to click on those the reviews, like the little bar charts or the photos, you could have that slide in and perhaps collapse the leftmost panel. Think what the Gmail does on a tablet, for example, where you might have your labels and the message subject and then the message details kind of on an axis which slides across. I was thinking something along those lines there, but didn't get time to mock it out, unfortunately.
Just one very quick thing is I'm looking at the design sort of from across the table on another computer here, and looking at them side by side, sort of small versions. I can't really see the text or anything properly, but the redesign just strikes me as very clean, and I can actually almost make out like a lot of the components even without being able to see exactly what's written there. So I think the design looks really good from that perspective. Like it's very easy to make out the most interesting pieces of information.
Yeah, that's just generally a good technique, right? Take your screenshot or if it's an APK, install it and put the tablet, 10 feet away from you and see if you can just roughly make out the structure, right? You don't have to obviously read the text because that's probably impossible, but it should be clear to you what the screen does, what its information is about. Yep. So, and here's, sorry, I forgot to do that.
Now I can read it.
Now you can. So this is, that same screen is blown up. Okay, so since we're super low on time, let's fly through Android design news. All right. So first, Juhani Lehtomäki released a book on Android UI called Smashing Android UI in collaboration with Smashing Magazine. I don't believe it's shipping just yet, the physical book, but I think the ebook is available on Google Play Books. And I think that QR code takes you to the book on Google Play Books or the Google Play store. So check that out. Super awesome. Oh, and Nick gets a mention in was it in the foreword to the book?
Juhani recognizes the awesome Google Plus community who talk about Android development and design.
Yeah. Cool. Next, somebody else want to talk about the books update? Anybody use books? I actually don't really read books.
No.
But anyway, okay, fine. So Google Play Books, the official Android app was updated. It now uses actually the contextual action bar. If you long press and select, something from the book, like some piece of text. If it's a location, if it's a place name, then it'll automatically do a Google Maps search and show you a little Google Now style card at the bottom, with which you could then click and get taken to Maps for, which is pretty awesome. You can also highlight things and do cool things with selections and playbooks.
I think it's just a really cool little UI flourish there. That it's like a zero kind of or one-touch interaction. It's not very clunky. I don't have to long press, copy it, go to the browser paste, whatever. It's just really taking digital books and showing you why digital books are more useful than physical books. And I think it also speaks to the fact that Google Books doesn't really use too much skeuomorphic cues. I mean, it allows for this kind of interaction, like kind of using the very heavy skeuomorph crutches kind of limit the scope of what you can do, how you can extend people's very well-established mental models. So I think it's just a really nicely done implementation.
Yeah. Okay. Adam?
Oh yeah. So very quickly, this is an app. Full disclosure, I've worked with Michael Pardo before in the past, but I thought it was a really neat little app. It's got one purpose: just look up stock quotes. It's implemented our design guidelines and holo theming very nicely. It's also got the sort of card pattern which you see around the place quite a lot now, and that we talked about quite a lot with these travel apps. And yeah, check it out. It's very nicely done.
Much to my and Nick's delight, I believe Michael's using either Roboto Thin or Roboto Light for the stock quote. I think it's just elegant.
I was indeed delighted when you threw this slide up.
All right.
And not just at the stock price.
Nick, do you want to talk about the OP redesign?
Yeah, so Marie strikes again. Marie, who featured last week with a redesign of the Ultimate Stopwatch app, has spent 1 hour apparently mocking up some redesigns of the popular European travel app Offi, I believe it's pronounced. So this is an app I've used when I visited Berlin this summer and found it quite hard to use. It was very dense in information, and she's really sprinkled some designers level over it and just really helped with the information density, and it's so much easier to read and clean. I very much like what she's done there. So follow the link if you want to read a bit more about that.
One thing I want to call out is in the right screen, you kind of have shuttle stops or bus stops that are connected by a line with circles. I think that's a great way to tie together chronological information. You can just have list items that say number 1 or first, and then next do this, then do that. But tying them together using a single form, using that line and then the circles as just an example, I think that's a great way to tie them together and kind of further inform the user that these are actually parts of a sequence.
Good job.
All right, so that does it for us. I think we're about 5 minutes late. That's not too bad. But anyway, thanks for joining. As always, I'm Roman Nurek.
Adam Kosh.
And I'm Nick Butcher. And don't forget to tune into the App Clinic this Friday when you can see which apps are next in line for perhaps being redesigned.
Yeah, and like we said in the very beginning, we're going to be focusing a lot on tablets this week. So I believe they're looking at tablet apps at the App Clinic, or the tablet versions of apps in the App Clinic. So again, thanks for joining. See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.